Before we begin, this episode contains discussions of addiction, substance abuse, mental health, and suicide that some listeners may find difficult. This conversation is for informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional care. If you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis, call 988 or text 988.
The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
OSHA coming down on a Houston contractor for exposing workers to safety hazards, and one worker ends up in the hospital. Today on the show, as part of Labor 132, we focus on our presenting sponsor, Laborers International Union of North America and Local 999. And the Massachusetts Laborers Benefits Fund. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 4th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Today, we're going to take a look at the evolution of mental health and substance abuse awareness, specifically in the trades and with placement into treatment. The LEAN program visits people while in treatment, assist with aftercare placement, follow-up post-treatment. I mean, it's very hands-on, very hands-on. And Jonathan Ashwell is going to give us all the details on that as our featured guest on Trades Day, also on America's Workforce. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. How about this? $38 billion of assets under advisement serving the needs of Taft-Hartley funds, corporations, public funds, endowments, foundations, and religious organizations. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. A U.S. Department of Labor investigation has concluded that a Houston, Texas utility construction company exposed employees to safety hazards after an excavation collapse hospitalized one worker. The department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration initiated an investigation into Blazy Construction Services, LLC, following the incident, which occurred while crews were installing sewer and water pipes for a residential development in Alvin, Texas. OSHA determined that the employer failed to adequately protect the excavation, provide a safe means of egress, and report the hospitalization within 24 hours as required by federal law. OSHA cited Blazy for 2 repeat violations and one other than serious violation and proposed penalties of $343,797. Now, the company has 15 business days from receipt of the citations and penalties to comply, request an informal conference with OSHA's area director, or actually contest the findings before the Independent Occupational Safety Health Review Commission. We'll see what happens on that one. In Los Angeles, federal prosecutors moved to dismiss the criminal charges against David Huerta. David, president of SEIU California, more than a year ago, after his arrest during protests during the Trump administration's immigration enforcement operations. Now, under the agreement, the case will be fully dropped by the end of this month, provided Huerta continues meeting his pretrial release conditions. Now, here's the backdrop on this story. Huerta was arrested in June of last year outside a Los Angeles business where agents were executing a search warrant. Authorities allege he blocked a driveway gate and encouraged others to obstruct access. Prosecutors initially brought a felony obstruction charge, downgraded it to a misdemeanor. This was in October of last year, and have now abandoned it altogether. Huerta says he was tackled, pepper sprayed, and detained for exercising his constitutional right to protest. And he called it part of the Trump administration's broader weaponization of the judicial system. His attorneys made a similar statement saying this case sought to, quote, silence criticism of the administration's improper immigration actions. So right now, we'll see what happens by the end of this month. But they have moved, the prosecutors have moved in Los Angeles to dismiss all criminal charges against David Huerta. Again, David is president of SEIU California. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jonathan Ashwell on behalf of the Massachusetts Laborers Benefit Funds, right here on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at LIUNA.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest today. Jonathan Ashwell is his name, and he is a recovery specialist associated with the Massachusetts Laborers Benefits Fund. And this is part of the LEAN program. And we've featured the LEAN program on the show several times. And LEAN stands for Laborers Escaping Addiction Now, which was actually created back in 2018. And this is part of our series we call Labor 132. It's been 132 years that Labor Day was created as a national holiday. And today we're going to take a look at the history and evolution of mental health, especially in the building trades. And Jonathan knows that all too well. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. Maybe let's just start off. You're in your mid-40s. You're the father of two daughters, and you've been in recovery. Let's start right there. And I appreciate you speaking out on this issue. I don't know if you've been listening to the show, and we appreciate LIUNA. That's our presenting sponsor. We've been with them for a long time, and frankly, we wouldn't be able to do this show without the sponsorship of the unions, and LIUNA is number one in that category, so we appreciate all of that. So talk to me a little bit about yourself, brother. Go ahead.
First off, Flash, thank you for having me here. So I joined the local in 2014. And prior to that, being a person in recovery, I actually worked in addiction treatment. It was mentally exhausting. So while I was still of age and could use my body, I figured I'm going to go and join the trades and make a good living and get some benefits. I lived next to my local, and we didn't have off-street parking. So I used to park in the local's parking lot, and I was real familiar with the business manager, local 999 in Springfield. I talked to him about getting in, and I ended up getting in. And honestly, I thought I had a leg up on most of the field. I could pass a urine test. I had a driver's license, and I could show up for 8 hours and work. So I thought I had a leg up. Oddly, my first job that I was on was a demo job. And I was told that a lot of people smoke weed on the job site. And when I went out to Boston to work, at my first break, guys were, they were sniffing drugs off the back of a flatbed truck. It was my first union job experience. And then almost in full circle, later on that job, a couple guys came over in a scissor lift, and one of them had one of the fellowship sticker on their hard hat. And like I had asked them, being a person in recovery, I asked him, I was like, what's up with that sticker? And he was like, oh, I've been sober for X amount of time. So I saw, both sides. I saw people, getting high on break. And then I also saw people who were in recovery that were in the trades. And, for years, I never hid my story working with other members. And I used to experience people coming to the job hungover or being like, John, can I talk to you? Because I was upfront about my history, where I'd come from, the drug use, the incarcerations, the homelessness. So people felt comfortable to talk. And 9 times out of 10 by lunchtime, people didn't want to talk anymore, whether they, got right on the job. But people knew they could go to it. And then when I heard about this program, I actually wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to get back into this world. Here I am with 2 little kids. After work, I can just shut the job down and go home. I was pushed to go interview from my local, and I wasn't sure if I'd end up in this position, but, after interviews and hearing what the job was about, it ended up coming to fruition.
Were you at all surprised? I mean, here you are, you're in recovery, you get a union job, and all of a sudden they're trying to get you back into it as far as getting high again. I mean, I would imagine you were pretty surprised. I don't know how prevalent it was, but take me back to that time.
You're talking about that first job site, that first day?
Yeah.
There wasn't an offer for me. And I had no problem in my personal recovery, like saying no or telling people like, I can't do that. I mean, the amount of times after a hard day's work, like I did a lot of paving, I did a lot of asphalt work. And like the amount of times guys would be like, hey, we got to have a beer after work. And I'm like, I can't. And they'd feel disrespected. Like, so I'd explain to them, like, we're either going to end up rolling around and fighting or we're stealing a piece of equipment. So like, it wasn't difficult for me to set that boundary and let people know that like, I'm not going to partake. I think the times have changed in construction work, union work, where before the narrative was work hard, play hard. You'd hear things like beer 30, liquid lunch, that narrative's starting to change. It's still out there, sure. But is it as condoned? No, not anymore. Where I think that was just part of everyday life. I mean, stories I used to hear about people going out and getting drunk and then just going back to the job site, sleep until work started again. Those days aren't happening as much.
I recall a story my dad told. My dad was a steel worker, and he worked hard. And going way back, I remember there was a bar right by the steel mill. And they started usually around 7 o'clock. Well, they're at the bar at 6 a.m. It was a shot and a beer, maybe 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. And then they worked. After they worked an 8-hour day, sometimes overtime, it was back at the bar. So, yeah, those, like you said, that was kind of more or less common back then. But, to your point, things have changed here. I have to ask you, though, because of the way you came on to those folks, did they call you anything? Did they say, hey, what are you, weak? You a sissy or something? Come on, why can't you be a tough guy like us? Did that happen?
I was never challenged in that way. The peer pressure part, like I was never criticized or put down. But also it was how I set the boundary. I'm not little either. So I don't know if people But no, I was never, it was never frowned upon. I wasn't even looked at like an outcast, which some people, I've heard stories back in the day. Like if you didn't partake, you were considered almost a rat because you weren't doing what the guys were doing. I was never perceived that way as far as I know. So no, there was no peer pressure or being put down.
Good for you. Well, let's talk about your role right now. You've been in recovery since 2009. You worked in addiction services, like you pointed out, for a couple of years. So explain to me how the LEAN program works, and we can get into the Massachusetts Laborers Benefits Fund because that's all under the same umbrella here. But explain your role right now, if you will.
When we started in 2018, I think it was the first of its kind. It was the first of its kind in the Laborers Union, and there's three of us. So Mark Lyle covers Region 1 of Massachusetts, the North Shore, and then Glenn Troy, he covers the South Shore down through the Cape. And we have our three regions between the state, and we cover about 22 locals, which could be about 11 to 12,000 members. If you include belly buttons, that balloons up to about 23,000-ish. And we didn't necessarily know what the direction was. We had a job description, right? But we didn't know what the direction was. And we started cold calling members who had existing claims with the health and welfare for substance use, alcohol use. So we would cold call members, and I'm going to be honest with you, the first member that I called challenged me, like, who are you? Why are you calling me? And I had to rethink my approach. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm out of local 999. I'm also a person in recovery. This is my new role. I'm just reaching out to see if I can be of any assistance. After just saying that, his walls dropped, and then we were able to have a conversation. So a lot of it in the beginning was just cold calling people, but then we started going to our apprenticeship programs and doing presentations. The idea was we weren't going to let every existing member know that we were available, but if we started in the apprenticeship programs, every new member would know who we are and what the resource was. So we started going into our training facility, introducing ourselves, giving that presentation. We'd try to get onto job sites, meet with contractors, go to local union halls and give a presentation. We created a hard hat sticker with our hotline number on it so members could throw that on their hard hat. We created just a little bracelet with the hotline number on it. And we tried to blast this information out as much as we could. And then if a member calls, it depends on what their need is, what their crisis is. If someone needs to go to treatment, we made sure that we had vetted treatment facilities, established relationships with treatment facilities. So if one of our members calls and then we call the treatment facility, we're going to get them into treatment relatively quick, which compared to my day of trying to go to treatment, it would be call back in 2 hours, call back in 2 hours. Now we're making sure our people get immediate access. Typically they get a ride to treatment from the treatment facility. And then we established it where we wanted to visit our people. So if I put someone into a treatment facility, I'm going to then go back a week later and follow up with them, sit down with them, build that intimate connection. They know that, the union has their back. We have their back. We try to help with aftercare, like what's home life look like? Do you need to go back home? Do you need to go into sober living? Do you want to continue on with care and to some lesser treatment? Then we ended up, COVID happened, right? So we ended up pivoting and we started some Zoom meetings. We had recovery meetings on Zoom. We were doing them twice a day. We did a noontime and a nighttime. And we were getting pretty good member participation. Anywhere from 25 to 40 members would sign on. And you get to watch them build relationships with each other, exchange phone numbers. Some of them might go to meetings together outside of that meeting. And then after COVID, we opened up a few around the state. So there's one in Boston on Mondays. Out in Western Mass, there's one in Holyoke Sunday morning, and then even farther Western Mass, there's one in Pittsfield on Wednesday evenings. So that's something that still continues to happen is, platform for the members to meet other members and go to a recovery meeting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's answering the phone. It's just talking to people, identifying with them, meeting them where they're at and having discussions and seeing how we can affect change.
Let me ask you this. When people sign up for the union, when they join the union, I should say, Jonathan, are they aware of all of this, the LEAD program? Do they kind of like, hey, you know what? Here's the job. This job is tough. You might get injured. You might end up, drinking too much, but we have a program to help you. To your knowledge, is that part of this?
When they initially come to sign up to try to become a laborer, I'm sure it's not discussed. But once they actually get in and they get into our apprenticeship program, like, yes, we make it a point to be in front of every apprenticeship program that comes through. And we sit down, we hand out our business card, the swag, we tell a little bit of our stories, and we tell them what the resource is. Even though technically they're at that time, they're not eligible for the health and welfare. They haven't earned their insurance yet, but they're human beings. They're our brothers and sisters. If they need help, they should have access to that help. And then they can't ever say they weren't aware that help was available.
If you don't mind, I'd like to talk about the stigma of mental health. And I mean, you know that all too well since you worked in addiction. And I am familiar with it because I worked in the municipal court system at a drug court, and we saw a lot of success going through the drug court. I want to get into recidivism. I want to get into that. But the big thing, what I learned right away, because people will say, well, just stop doing drugs. What's wrong with you? A lot of people don't realize that addiction is a disease. It's just like heart disease. And, if I have problems with my heart, I'm going to get right into the doctor. They're going to take care of me. And I know there was a time, well, if you got a drug problem, well, you got to wait until there's an opening in counseling or a treatment bed. You know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
How are we navigating through that right now?
I think within our union, I'll keep it in a smaller umbrella, especially at a national level, with lean being pushed now with our international, with lean LIUNA and a couple other lean programs being created around the country. And now there's meetings around the country. The narrative that I've heard out of our higher ups, Brent Booker, Michael Sabitoni, is it's okay to not be okay. We've had social media pushes with high up people letting the members know, like, it's okay to ask for help. With trying to beat down that stigma and saying, like, it's okay to not be okay, it's okay to ask for help, I think it's creating a space for people to actually come forward and talk about it. Like, are we ever going to get rid of the stigma as a whole? I doubt it. I mean, people are always going to have their judgments, right? I handed my business card to a member one time and I asked him, just take the card. I was just introducing myself. And he said, I don't want that. Let them all die. And that was his perception. And I wasn't there to change his mind. All I said to him was, can you please just hold on to the card? Like, God forbid your coworker or your kids or your spouse need it, right? I'm not out here trying to have an argument with people and trying to make them understand that this is a disease. It's more about trying to just, when people want help, make sure it's available, make sure that they're comfortable stepping forward and asking for the help. And even if that's what you believe, just don't harm someone else. Give them that avenue to ask for help.
Jonathan Ashwell is our featured guest on the show today. This is our series we call Labor 132, kind of a countdown to Labor Day. Labor Day created 132 years ago. And I'll tell you, the great thing about unions, they brought us the 8-hour day, time off, pensions, sick leave, you name it. They're also involved in trying to keep you stable. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. We're going to continue with Jonathan right after this. Here's the website to go to. It's the Massachusetts Laborers Benefit Fund, MLBF.org. MLBF.org. I want to do a shout out to LIUNA Local 999 for making this possible today. We'll continue with Jonathan right after this.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at LIUNA.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at LIUNA.org. The Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan, we build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great iron worker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. We also appreciate our sponsors, and today we're focusing on Labor's International Union of North America, specifically their LIUNA program, which we have talked about on the show before. LIUNA stands for Labor's Escaping Addiction Now. It was created actually in 2018. And our featured guest today is Jonathan Ashwell. He is a recovery specialist. He's been in recovery since 2009. I congratulate you on that. That's quite an accomplishment there. And hopefully that will continue. And the very fact that you're working in this field, that in a way is special. It's I guess that's comforting to know because, you know, first of all, you can speak to addiction to other brothers that are going through this or trying to get some help. It's therapy for you in a way. However, we have an issue here, which you, I'm sure, are very much well aware of. The suicide rate in the trades. And we've done countless interviews on this, Jonathan. I'm sure you checked a couple of the shows. Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas is very vocal, very great guest we've had on the show. Mike Hazard from Veterans in Piping. I mean, the trades are really getting into this because something's got to be done. It's 4 or 5 times higher than the general population. So with everything that's being done about this, I mean, there's a history to what you're doing here. You're trying to turn this around. How would you assess what we have done so far? I mean, obviously, there's a mountain ahead of you here, buddy. You know that. This is a big issue. You know, it's one by one. You're getting through. Looking forward, what do you see ahead?
I agree with you that there's still a lot of work to be done. But to even be here and having this conversation, I think a lot of work has also been done over the scope of the last 8 years. I mean, this is a topic that you're hearing about everywhere, even within LIUNA, the trades as a whole, because the numbers are staggering. And those aren't just numbers, those are people. That's somebody to somebody. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he knows that 2 New York laborers recently lost their life to suicide. So this is still it's still a common occurrence. I know that we now have the Hope Lives program. Well, it's more of a Hope Lives is more of a it's a promotion for the 988 number, so people know that 988's available. Within our organization, the mass laborers, we're currently interviewing for an in-house clinician so members have access to a professional that's in-house, not an outside provider, an outside therapist, but they'll be able to call just like they can call us on a hotline. They'll be able to talk to someone directly from the health fund. And I think approaching these conversations and being able to, again, give someone a platform to talk to someone when they need to. The identification piece, you mentioned that earlier about being in recovery and then also working in this space. I think that makes it easier for someone to reach out to, for someone to call and say like, hey, I need help. I'll struggle. Because they know that I was there too. And that other people that work in the space that also walked in their shoes. Right. And as you see the peer movement grow, I would think that's kind of how we're attempting to tackle and climb that mountain, as you said, is we're starting to see the peer movement go across the country. The laborers alone, to St. Louis, now you got Wisconsin. I know New York has a bunch of stuff going on. Ohio has stuff going on. I've heard of meetings and people reaching out up in Indiana. Like it's growing. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't know, there's not a magic wand you can wave and just have one answer, but I think the direction in that we're going is going to be good.
I know a lot of people that work in recovery are, going through recovery themselves. What makes this even more special is the union component, because you mentioned earlier in the first segment, when he found out, well, you're a union brother, you went through this whole thing. So that kind of tore down that wall. Doesn't that kind of take it to another level, in your opinion?
Absolutely. To not only be able to identify with, the lifestyle of, alcohol and drug use, but then, I bring, it's not just me, but I bring the wisdom and experience of also being in recovery and working in the elements, waking up every day, feeling that pressure of having to provide for the family. I wouldn't turn down overtime because we needed the money. I had kids I had to pay for, you know what I mean? We have to make our insurance. You want to make your pension credit. We know what it's like to carry that stress. And then also how physically taxing and dangerous the job can be. And, you go home, your loved ones don't always know that. Working out on the road and on the highways and paving and trying to dodge traffic. And then you go home and it's what took you so long to get home? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Glad you're here. Can you help with the dishes? And it's I almost died 3 times today, but so we understand that, you know what I mean? And that's what we bring to other people. And just to say, cause they haven't touched on it much, but the mass building trades as a whole, the Recovery Council, right? If you go on their website, massbuildingtrades.org, and you go to the recovery drop-down box, there's 15 trades listed on there, and each has an identified person, rank and file or full-time staff, of someone that people can reach out to. And I know the Building Trades Recovery Council saw that as this is going to help members reach out because they see the peer model working, right? And so now all the trades in Massachusetts have an identified person who's willing to help, because they're a union brother or sister and they bring life experience.
That is so good to hear. Well, I really appreciate your candidness here on the show, because this is a subject that we at America's Workforce will continue to stay on because of its importance. The other question I have for you is recidivism. And I know we did tracking when I worked at the municipal court level. You get out of it what you put into it. And obviously treatment, sometimes the first treatment doesn't work. Maybe the second one, maybe the third one, but you got to be consistent and persistent at the same time. I'm just wondering, with what you have done with the LEAN program and what you've done in Massachusetts, how do you see that? Is it working pretty well as far as people staying off drugs and alcohol?
I'm sure there's some fine data that could be brought up about the quote unquote success of the program. When I asked about it in the beginning, we don't really shame people with diabetes, right? If they weren't taking their insulin properly or their metformin properly.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. I know myself, Mark and Glenn, it's hard for us to hang our hat on a success, define success. What does that really look like? So we won't tell people we're saving lives, because if we have to hang our hat on we're saving lives, we also have to hang our hat on the people who didn't make it. We just try to make an impact in someone's life. And yes, I've seen people celebrate 6 years. I've seen people get back with their family, get their foreman truck back. They're back to work. Like, we advocate with the company sometimes when people step forward and they want treatment. And we have some contractors who are on board. They were standing side by side with us at standouts saying, like, if you need help, come forward. And then when you finish treatment, your job will be waiting for you. So we've seen a lot of success stories. Those meetings, the recovery meetings that we put on, I get to watch members exchange numbers with other members, and members get hope from other members. So it's tough with the recidivism stuff because, like, I mean, there is probably stats somewhere. It's like, there's X amount of time someone goes to treatment before they actually, quote unquote, get it. There's also the mentality of, like, the shorter someone's runs are, they're seeking treatment quicker. So just because someone has a lot of claims that they went to treatment a lot of times, like, that could be viewed as a success. They don't want to be out there getting high as much anymore. So it's hard. I don't have any fine data on it, but I have definitely seen success stories and people's lives change. And I've also seen people still pass away.
Well, you are one of the success stories. I hope you know that, Jonathan, because you've been sober now for 17 years. It's one day at a time, And you have to understand this, those of you listening, sobriety is the beginning, not the end. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of the next life. All right. I'm going to leave it on that note. Let's drive everybody to the website here. It's mlbf.org, the Massachusetts Laborers Benefit Fund. Shout out here to Laborers International Union of North America, specifically Local 999. So many good locals around the country trying to tackle this problem. And this is a problem we will continue to address here on America's Workforce. There's a history of addiction in this country going back a long time. And right now, especially in the trades, we have to do something about it. We have to do something about it right now. And LIUNA is. So, brother, you hang in there, stay safe, stay sober, and stay in touch, okay?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, the SAG-AFTRA merger. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.